The maid rushes swiftly through the intricately lit forest where each ray of light plays its mysterious hues on the golden leaf. Her figure, like a dancing shadow, drifts forward, emphasizing the dance of light and shadow. In this maze of tree trunks, she seems a lost thread in the fabric of a mysterious nature. As Urania, the epitome of elegance and sophistication, is carried forward, her maid form is covered in a shimmering mantle of adventure. Her dress, as if woven from the rays of the moon, follows her like a submissive to the magic of the night. She has to run through a whirlwind of fantasies and dreams, creating a picturesque accompaniment to the forest symphony. In a looking glass of shadows, individual trees meander in loops of time like forgotten lines in nature's poem. But in this pursuit of herself, with every step she takes, like a transparent landscape, an invisible persecutor lurks behind her. He asks in every whistle of the wind and whisper of the leaves to stop, but his pleas sound like echoes in the hidden corners of the forest. Thus, the maid Urania, becoming a character in the forest saga, continues her run into the unknown, encountering moments along the way when light and shadow dance in magical union, and the magic of the forest flows through her fingers, leaving in the air the trembling traces of her adventure. The girl was deep in thought, disturbed by the thought that in her former life she had embodied the guise of a maid, a commonplace and inconspicuous but seemingly momentous figure. The shadow of the past covered her memories, and she felt that whirlwind of time in which she had been the one who had caught the eye like a sigh of beauty in a royal palace. Her musings blurred in her imagination like a haze, creating pictures of a past life where she, as a maid, had unexpectedly caught the attention of the king himself. Her ordinariness became a beguiling mystery, and her modesty an exceptional flavor in the royal garden of intrigue. She managed to charm looks and even gain attention, as if by an invisible thread woven of mysterious magic. Now, immersed in her memories, the girl realizes that her every movement, every moment spent in the abode of the royal halls, is imbued with the story that formed the basis of their meeting. She has to look into the mirror of the past and accept that in her past life she was not just a maid, but one whose inconspicuous beauty left a secret trace in the king's memory. Urania, lost in the labyrinth of her past, found herself a whirlwind of passions and feelings, swept up in the magic of the royal palace. All her former secrets and modesty became a thing of the past when her heart began to beat in unison with the heart of the king himself. She was transformed from an inconspicuous maid to an exciting mistress whose eyes sparkled with elegance and passion. Her tender touches became a gift to the king, like a magical outfit in a sumptuous ballet of the senses. Together they spent their time in high-born hobbies, immersing themselves in a world of exquisite pleasures and luxury. Urania became the epitome of grace and style, leaving the shadows of her past and forgetting her true origins. Outside the palace walls, time stretched like a magical weave of destiny's threads, and Urania forgot her former roles. She became someone who shared with the king not only a bed, but also admiration for art, enjoyment of the taste of fine food, and fun in the vast halls of the palace. So in their embrace, two worlds merged, creating pictures of passion and romance, where Urania became not only a lover, but also the protagonist of a fairy tale novel, which was woven in the royal palace, like a light thread in the great fabric of time. In the prince's arms, surrounded by care, Urania began to enjoy prosperity, her every care becoming a light in the royal treasury. In return for her services, she received luxury and splendor, as if she were a character in a fairy tale, where every step she took was accompanied by the clinking of gold and the scent of luxury. The contemplation of the maid's ugly form now seemed past, like the wind of a spring morning dispelling the last shadows of night. But in this sea of exquisite garments and glitter, there was still a trace of modesty and simplicity beating in her heart that she was to discover. The sweet illusion was shattered, however, when a mysterious painting was discovered in her room. Under the glass vault of the royal palace, a sinister picture blossomed that unraveled the threads of the monarch's destinies. A curse like a shadow pierced the hearts of the king and queen, tearing their world to shreds. Urania, sobbing and desperate, was led through the halls of the palace to the cold scaffold like a soaring swallow, feeling the cold of the wind for the first time. Words of justification fluttered from her lips like a last breath, but they vanished like smoke from a dying fire. The former maid and mistress of the king faced the darkness of intrigue, where even her sincere words seemed nothing more than whispers in the gloom. The scaffold stood as a symbol of disgrace, while the palace that had seemed to her a paradise was turning into a sinister labyrinth. The shadow of the curse weaved along the walls like an invisible hand, setting hinges for their misfortune. Urania, trying to meet the king's eyes, saw in their reflection a moment of tragedy, and the palace that had been a temple of love became a witness to a nightmare. In the closed silence of the king's chambers, the beats of time rattled like the echoes of her own footsteps in the night. The absence of King Kraus III hung in the air like a heavy gloom, and every moment was a true test of Urania's heart. In the intricate fabric of fate, she realized that her foolishness and insolence had become the seal of her own misfortune. Interwoven by intrigue, hitherto hidden secrets were suddenly revealed to her as locked away in the royal treasury. Urania, on the verge of execution, realized that her belief in the king's love was an illusion, floating on the murky waters of an illusory romance. Blindsided by admiration, she had failed to consider that the king, like a shadowy figure in their story, could be but a puppet in the hands of mysterious forces. Now that she was facing her inevitable fate, the realization of her mistakes became a heavy burden for Urania. Without a shadow of a doubt, she realized how deeply she had strayed from her senses and how dearly she would pay for her artificially created world. In these last moments, she thought of her past and dreamed of freedom from the shackles she had placed upon herself. Weariness coursed through Urania's body as she crouched on the ground, feeling a random branch tear her luxurious dress like an unexpected fate. In that moment, she realized that her illusion of royal splendor had crumbled like the petals of a fleeting flower, and instead of magic, only the wreckage of dreams remained. Pensively looking over the ruins of her elegance, Urania began to realize that His Majesty was probably being influenced by the foreign words surrounding her. The serene king who offered his lap as a pillow could only see her as a mere maid who had accidentally stumbled on the road of life. Sighing heavily, Urania looked at the tattered dress as an allegory of her own status. She realized that sometimes even the brightest colors can fade, and a mask of grandeur can hide one's true self. So she remained sitting on the ground under the stars, opening a new chapter of her destiny in her heart, in which there was no room for blind faith in a fairy tale. Two unexpected companions, appearing in the form of maids, caught up with Urania, breaking the momentary peace of her thoughts. They told her to keep running as if some unknown force were pushing her forward through a thicket of doubts. Urania met their gazes, looking into dark eyes that seemed a piece of her own mysterious destiny. Sitting on a sprawling root, she wondered, why was she running if every step she took led to a mirror of her own lost moments? Her previous life had ended under the cloak of tragedy, but instead of plunging into the abyss of despair, she now ran as if trying to escape her inner demons. Her heart pounded in time with the heavy paces of the run, and her mind tried to unravel the tangle of unsolved mysteries. Perhaps the answer to the question of why she was running was not in avoiding the past, but in searching for new pages that had not yet been written in the book of her destiny. After all, perhaps even after tragedy, there is an opportunity to start a new chapter in which there will be no place for past offenses. The red-haired maid, revealing her menacing screams like an echo of an ominous stormy sky, suggested to Urania the inevitability of stopping. Her scream was lightning in a dark sky, a reminder that not all could be forgotten in the shadows of the past. Unspoken reproaches and heavy memories rang out in that sound of anger. Urania's heart slowed its run, and her mind became a place where the ghosts of her own yesterday whispered. That day that had been lived before suddenly took on new hues, as if the colors of life had flowed over her fingers, leaving traces of indelible events. At the shouts of the red-haired maid, Urania stopped, feeling that each shout reflected past mistakes. Now she was to face what was marked in her own timeline. In that moment of silence was the voice of her past, whispering of the inevitability of facing what she was destined to experience. Just before the curtain of her life, Urania felt a peace that flowed to her like a warm wind, carrying away the last shadows of doubt. Resigned to her fate, she lifted her gaze one last time, welcoming the last bright moment that shone in the heavens. The sun, unwavering and eternal, shimmered like a ball of fire, reflecting in her eyes. In that last moment, filled with humility, Urania immersed herself in the memories of the beautiful moments she had experienced while contemplating this fiery kaleidoscope in the abode of the heavens. A longing resounded in her soul that she would never again be able to feel the caress of this luminary on her skin and see it blossom over the horizon. Urania's heart intertwined with the rays of the sunset like a farewell waltz, and she let herself drift away, feeling her soul blurring into the luminous hues of celestial harmony. One last time, before she was eclipsed by the shadows, she gave her last glance to the sun, through which she realized the magic of her short but rich life. The moment the unknown energy embraced Urania, she felt the space around her begin to dance to the rhythm of an unknown melody. The essence that had found her voice began to weave words like mysterious lace, revealing to her the intricate secrets of the shining sun. The power that spoke without words wove into her mind the realization that the sun was not just light, but the living essence of power that sustained life on this planet. In every emanation of this ball of fire is hidden the power that fills the universe with strength, forming a kind of symphony in the vastness of space. She, like a listener of a great choral work, was immersed in this light ocean of silence, where the stars became notes in an eternal melody. In response to the invisible question of energy, an uncharted prospect opened up to her, not just to touch the sun, but to become part of this majestic cosmic ballet. There was no need for direct speech in this interaction, for the power of the sun spoke to her in a language of light and energy that penetrated to the very depths of her being. The mysterious power that surrounded Urania promised her a new existence and enough power to rule the world. It whispered of the exquisite possibilities that lay in her future, as if opening the door to an inexhaustible source of energy and wisdom. Yet there was a warning in that vow, a reminder that to touch the sun, even for her, remained an impossibility for the common man. The force warned that interfering with the flames of the fireball would result in a violent consuming of everything, including Urania herself. The raging flames possessed mighty power, but also destructive power. And the warning was a clear reminder of the dangers of the spectacle glittering in the heavens. Thus, among the vows of power was the important wisdom of not forgetting the boundaries that are placed before man, even if he has gained incredible powers. In this vow, Urania heard the call to cherish her new life and the world that would be hers. With a sudden burst of light, Urania opened her eyes. Instead of the vast expanse of space, she found herself lying on a soft pillow with the king's blonde curls bent over her face. The moment of return was so exhilarating and strange, as if she had crossed the boundaries of time into her own past. She could smell the smell of the royal palace again, hear the whispers of caring servants, and everything around her reminded her of the important stage of her life that had just begun. In that moment, it seemed to her that time was weaving its thread not only forward but also backward, intertwining destinies and creating a great picture of life. Urania, once again in this significant moment, realized that a new chapter was opening before her. Under the king's benevolent gaze, the most important phase of her life was beginning, full of mystery, power, and possibility. This return to the beginning of her story was a gift of time that once again gave her the chance to rewrite her destiny, but now with the experience she had gained on the space journey. Urania, suddenly meeting the face of her former lover, could not hide the rush of surprise. She sprang up like a phoenix awakened from a deep sleep and accidentally collided forehead to forehead with the king, creating a moment of history meeting that was shadowed by both time and space. The former lover's face was a living reflection of the past that now, like a long-awaited prediction, collided with the present. Urania's eyes sparkled with emotion, surprise, nostalgia, and perhaps even a little embarrassment. The collision of their foreheads was a symbol of the past and present coming together, like a vortex of time that opened up new vistas for her. In that moment, she realized that her return carried with it not only the opportunity to rewrite her destiny, but also to meet those who had left a mark on her heart. She stood there in that royal scene like the heroine of her own fairy tale, ready for a new act of her amazing drama. Amid the excitement caused by the cries of the king and the maid, a guard approached the group under the shade of a tree, shouting his grievances at Urania for allowing his majesty to be trespassed upon. The guard's gaze was full of severity, as if the shadow of punishment already loomed over the heroine of our tale. King Kraus III, rubbing his forehead, spoke of his condition. He said that he was fine, as if emphasizing his ability to bear the hardships of life. His voice sounded with a mixed feeling of surprise and emphasized self-confidence, as if he was eternally ready for storms and trials. Thus, under the tree, in the shade of the evening light, the scene unfolded, with each character playing his part in the intriguing weave of fate. Urania found herself at the center of attention as the protagonist, whose unforeseen events only added to the mystery of their story. Urania, absorbed in the whirlwind of what was happening, could not realize what had actually happened. She stood there as if in a fog, her inner world intertwined with the outer chaos. The shock of realizing her living self found expression in her astonished eyes. In her inner world, the memories of her previous life dissolved like the haze of a dream, an ordinary dream of which only echoes remained. Urania was confronted with a reality that seemed alien and unknown to her. How was it possible that she, certain of her death, could feel alive again? Her consciousness wavered between two worlds, as if on the edge between reality and dream. Urania's eyes flashed with emotion, surprise, bewilderment, and something else elusive and mysterious. This moment was a mystery to her, a mystery contained in her own destiny, where reality and dream intertwined, creating an incomprehensible harmony in her inner world. The king, concerned for Urania, turned to her, asking how she was feeling, for he was deeply moved by the fact that she seemed to be overheating in the heat. Shocked by the claims of heat stroke, Urania began to look around for some inner confirmation, as if trying to recall her past life. The king, with concern in his voice, inquired about Urania's well-being, for it was important to him to know that his subjects were safe. He stood there under the shade of a tree like a gatekeeper to other worlds, examining Urania's face for signs of fatigue or distress. Urania, vaguely remembering the past vicissitudes of her life, looked up slowly as if weighing each word in her answer. Echoes of long-gone memories flickered in her eyes, but it seemed her past life was still a dead mystery to her. As she surveyed her surroundings, Urania suddenly noticed the mask she had worn in the days when she served the queen. This inconspicuous attribute of her past life splashed memories before her, as if opening the door to a room where the secrets of her previous existence were kept. In her hands was a piece of that history she was trying to master. A sudden realization came, however, when her eyes fell on the maid's uniform she wore. The garment, like a magical outfit, conjured up images of her past life, where she had been a maid and mistress to the king. In the maid's uniform, she saw a reflection of her previous self that had barely touched her soul. Thus, the mask and the uniform became symbols that connected Urania's two worlds, her former path, filled with the events of the palace, and the unpredictable future that now stretched before her. She stood there, with pieces of her past in her hands, ready to reveal the secrets that lay in her heart. A strong jolt of memories hit Urania, as if a whirlwind of the past had taken her head in a ring and swept colorful pictures of memories before her eyes. Hundreds of moments of the past splashed before her, creating a canvas that became a sharp realization of her present situation. All the details, like puzzles, came together to form a picture of her past life. The sights of the palace, the rustling of royal fabrics, and the smells of luxury flashed in her imagination. She felt again the weight of the crown and the bitterness of forbidden passions. All these moments were now part of her present, and Urania, distraught, finally realized that she had returned to the very day that had led her down the path of the royal mistress. This moment of epiphany was like a transparent mirror reflecting her fate. Urania stood at the juncture of two times, like a wanderer in a book that had become alive. With a face full of wonder and excitement, she realized that past and present had merged together, creating an incredible twist to her story. The king, noticing that Urania did not look too well, expressed his concern, asking if she was not feeling well. He carefully handed her a handkerchief in an effort to offer support. However, Urania herself, panickedly waving away Kraus III, passionately declared that she was fine. At that moment, even the air was filled with tension, as if an invisible veil of uncertainty floated between them. The king, looking at Urania with dark eyes, saw that her words and gestures contradicted what might lie behind her facade of self-assurance. Urania, with a gaze full of determination, waved the king away as if protecting her secrets, but her trembling hands told their own story. In this moment, even the shadows under the tree seemed wary, as if a foreshadowing that Urania's world was just beginning to unfold, leaving questions unanswered and mysteries unsolved. With a casual touch, the lightness of Urania's movement snatched the handkerchief from the king's hands, as if invisible threads of fate were unraveling before the eyes of the spectators. The scattered handkerchief, like a messenger of freedom, left the king's hands. In response to this unforeseen act of Urania, the guard, as if a military commander, sounded a menacing shout, admonishing the girl to repent. There was not only rage in his shout, but also a desire to restore the order disturbed by her insolent gesture. The guard's gaze pierced the space like a blade, and his demand was clear, like an unknown force calling for repentance for inconsistencies committed. Urania, caught in a whirlwind of circumstances, tried to brush aside the guardian as if justifying herself to the invisible judge of her actions. At this moment, the drama under the tree was unfolding like a cinematic montage where action and emotion weave a spectacle full of unexpected twists and turns and complex characters. The king, softening the situation, tried to calm Urania by speaking words of comfort. He said that she need not worry and that he would find another handkerchief for her, as if affectionately suggesting that what had happened was no big deal. His voice sounded like a gentle chord, designed to calm the storm of emotions that arose around him. The king, at this moment, like a good shepherd, was trying to calm Urania's anxiety by offering his support. His words contained not only a promise to find a new handkerchief, but also an understanding that what mattered most was not trivialities, but well-being and tranquility. Thus, under the tree, in the shadow of an unknown past and an unknown future, a moment of understanding between the king and Urania was unfolding, like notes creating harmony in this complex symphony of life. Urania stared at the back of the departing king, immersed in the whirlwind of her thoughts. In that moment, she realized how much she had longed for this moment, for the touch of a king that seemed unattainable in her memories. Her eyes followed him as if each step was a mystery, an unknowable answer to her own questions. Urania's heart pounded frantically, creating an internal rhythm that was reflected in her trembling hands. It was the final moment of realization, the moment when past and present intertwined in her heart. In every beat was the energy of moments lived, in every tremor the echoes of the passions that resounded in the past. Thus, under the tree, in the shadows of the past, Urania stood as if a thread of time were connecting her to herself. The look in her eyes was a mixed cocktail of emotions, nostalgia, love, and that elusive longing that accompanies a return to one's own past. Urania, as if bowing to time and fate, fell to her knees, immersed in thought. In her musings, the echoes of a few moments ago when she had been addressed by something higher, more powerful, transporting her back in time, sounded like a thread of unknown mysticism. Maybe it was God, maybe it was something else. But in this situation, it was not so much the identification that mattered as the very fact of being able to relive her history. Her reflections touched on the moment when something unfathomable, like divine intervention, had allowed her to cross the boundary of time. She realized that what was most important was not understanding who was behind this great upheaval, but the opportunity to relive her own history. Thus, Urania's knees were bowed before the majestic unknown, and the fire of determination flared in her heart to live this second chance to the fullest. A sudden epiphany enveloped Urania as she realized she couldn't pinpoint where she was. A moment of ignorance enveloped her like a fog, and she felt that she was standing at the crossroads of time and space. Raising her eyes, Urania found the library in front of her, which towered like a temple of knowledge. Within its walls, at first glance, hid the answers to the countless questions that plagued her mind. But the amazing thing was that this library was inaccessible to the maids. The fact that Urania now stood before its doors made it feel as if a gateway to a forbidden world of knowledge had been opened to her. Thus, before the library, as if before a portal to a new chapter of her adventures, Urania stood with mixed feelings. The unknown future stretched out before her like an unexplored forest, and the library was the key to unlocking the mysteries hidden in her soul. Instead of rushing to the library, however, Urania simply sat down on the steps, revealing her legs completely covered in abrasions and scratches from her intense jog. She sank into thought, her gaze lost in distant horizons, as if she was reading the mysterious messages of time in every scratch on her skin. Urania's legs had witnessed her daring adventure, and each abrasion was like the imprint of her determination to get back to life. As she sat there, she thought about how excited she was for this new beginning, but at the same time, there was a flicker of bewilderment in her eyes. Why had she traveled back in time? This question, like an unsolved mystery, hung in the air, keeping her in suspense. So on the steps in front of the library, Urania, her eyes fixed on the unknown future, became the thread connecting past and present, and she solved her own riddles step by step. Urania's face flushed like a blush in the garden of a spring morning, remembering the features of the king's face. Her memories were filled with tender words, warm glances, and sensual moments like a painting unfolding in her imagination. She carefully reconstructed in her mind every detail of this memorable encounter. Pensive, Urania tried to understand why God had sent her back in time and chosen this particular day when she had been noticed by King Kraus III. The mosaic of events seemed a mystery, and each fragment of her memories was like a piece of a puzzle that she had to put together. So sitting in front of the library, Urania became an explorer of her own destiny, examining each piece of the puzzle that was scattered before her in the windows of time. The sudden recollection that she had forgotten her mask again seized Urania. These reflections led her to one secret rule which was well known to all in the palace. On days when the queen meets with the king, no servant except the palace's highest personage, Her Highness Stasia, is allowed to expose her face to the king's gaze. This unspoken rule falls like an invisible shadow on the palace attire, and every servant, whether maid or servant, carefully observes this custom. The mask becomes a kind of shield, protecting their identity from the gaze of the king, like a secret ritual action, which gives the meeting a high importance. It was because of a fresh violation of this strict rule that Her Highness, who had once again exposed the hatred in her heart, would regard Urania with the same coldness as she had in a previous life. It was this shadow of the past that served as the burning motive that drove the other maids to pursue Urania, as if they were dogs let loose by Lady Stasia, the chief warrior of the rules of palace etiquette. Lady Stasia, like a mistress of intrigue, used her influence to direct the maids against the one who dared to expose her face to the king's gaze. The maids, like devoted guards of fidelity to the palace order, heeded her every word, and rose against Urania, who was lying on the lap of the man who belonged to Her Highness. So in front of the library, Urania felt the weight of past mistakes like chains that bound her to that world where even the royal court is a battlefield for survival in a world of strict rules and ruthless intrigue. Urania pondered over how to be in this difficult situation. No matter how hard she would try, it seemed that she was destined to experience hard days again and accept only modest leftovers from the noble's table. It was like a repeat of a scenario from a past life, and she realized that she was caught in a maelstrom of circumstances where her fate once again depended on the generosity of the upper classes. Her only salvation seemed to be the interest of a wealthy nobleman in her personality. Urania realized that in this world where social barriers were so pronounced, her only bridge to prosperity could be the attention and support of a powerful nobleman. It was a game of survival in a world where every move and decision could determine her fate. So, in front of the library, Urania stood at a crossroads, once again forced to weave her fate from the finest threads of influence and intrigue, striving to find her place in this palace labyrinth. Tears flowed down Urania's cheeks like living drops of nostalgia. She remembered her past life, where every moment was filled with luxury and refinement, realizing the difference with her current situation. The tears became like gems adorning her face, where the glint of sadness was intertwined with the memories of how things used to be. Those tears were a restless flow of time, taking her back to the past years, where she had bathed in luxury and power. Nostalgia embraced her like an invisible touch of those days when every step she took was accompanied by the rustle of silk fabrics and the clinking of precious jewelry. So, in front of the library, Urania stood, reliving a moment of sad harmony between past and present, where her tears witnessed the transition from luxurious reality to the shadow of the fate that was taking shape in her new life. She wiped away her tears, determined that everything would be all right. Urania realized that she still had the opportunity to join the light ranks by becoming the king's mistress. But this time she decided to proceed more carefully, keeping to the shadows to avoid the shadows of intrigue that could set her up again. Determination and willpower shimmered in her eyes. She knew that history had a way of repeating itself, but now she was ready to learn from past mistakes. Keeping in the shadows, Urania was going to take her chance with the king more carefully, so that no one could set her up this time. So, in front of the library, a new hope flickered in her eyes like a ray of light in a dark corridor, and she stepped forward, ready to accept the challenge of fate. Unfortunately, it was on the king's lap that Urania woke up, and this moment did not go unnoticed by the queen, which only increased her dislike for the girl. But instead of despairing, Urania met the new day with determination and a mood of anticipation. She realized that the past was inevitable, and instead of wallowing in regret, she decided to use the episode as an impetus for new action. The queen's hatred was like wind in the sails of her resolve, and Urania was determined to act ahead of events. So, rising from her knees, Urania raised her gaze forward, as if preparing for a new challenge. She realized that every morning was a new opportunity to change her destiny, and she was ready to take her life into her own hands, even if it had to go against the circumstances of the palace and the royal will. Suddenly, the library door opened, hitting Urania on the back. A familiar voice from the back of the library said that if the maid continued to stand at the door, he would not be able to get out. Urania, feeling the blow on her back, turned around, surprise reflected in her eyes. The voice from the library sounded like a mysterious echo, creating an air of mystery and enigma around her. The words sounded like a warning, as if the voice knew of something she herself had not yet realized. Thus, in front of the library, Urania became a participant in a new and mysterious twist in her unpredictable fate. The black-haired minister Oscar emerged from the depths of the library, shining with intelligence and erudition, holding a stack of books in his hands. His hair, like amber swirls, made him look mysterious and refined. He walked with confidence and pride, as if each book in his hands was not just a piece of literature, but the key to the knowledge of the universe. Urania, feeling his insistent gaze, sensed that this man carried with him not only volumes of texts, but also secrets that could change her future. Facing Oscar, her heart began to beat faster, expecting that this encounter might shed light on the mysterious forces of palace intrigue. Overjoyed by the unexpected encounter, Urania greeted Minister Oscar, whom she had known so well in her previous life. However, in this new story, in which her past was intertwined with her present, Oscar did not recognize her. There was a look of bewilderment on his face as they seemed to be meeting for the first time. Urania, keeping her smile, realized that this uncertainty added a very mysterious tinge to their meeting. At this moment, the books in the minister's hands did not seem to be the only thing he carried with him, and Urania was ready to plunge into this new round of her destiny, which seemed filled with mystery and possibilities. Realizing that they had not yet interacted once at this time, Urania bowed, apologizing for her mistake. However, an irritated Minister Oscar pointed out that instead of apologizing, she should help him with the door if she still didn't want to leave. Urania, rising from her bow, felt the minister's stern gaze on her and immediately offered to help. She was ready to prove herself in the eyes of this important official, even if it required taking part in frivolous tasks like opening the door. Thus, once again at the entrance to the library, Urania contemplated the strange twists and turns of her new destiny. Urania opened the door, politely letting the black-haired boy in. He thanked her, expressing his appreciation, but her attention was drawn to the stack of books in his hands. Not missing a moment, Urania noticed with a smile that Oscar seemed to be deep in reading as usual. The remark caught Oscar off guard, and for a moment he was taken aback by such attention to his notable devotion to books. For the first time, his passion for reading was under the microscope of another's eyes, and he seemed to lose his balance a little. Urania, savoring this moment, knew that new paths full of mystery and unexpected discoveries lay ahead in their encounter. Urania covered her mouth, realizing that once again she had said something without thinking. Questions of who was standing in front of her surfaced in her thoughts. Minister Oscar, unlike Kraus III, who looked like a swan, appeared before her like a black jaguar. This predator, known for his rudeness and talent, had something mysterious and unpredictable about him. Oscar looked like a flamboyant personality, personifying strength and defiance. His gait had the grace of a predator willing to do anything to achieve his goal. Urania, aware of the metaphor of the black jaguar, knew that in this man she could meet not only an official but also an interlocutor with his own secrets and dark character traits. Oscar was unique, however, because in his past life he had never looked down on Urania, never considered her unworthy of taking the place of the king's mistress. In his eyes, she had always been a human being, not just a servant or an object of favor for highborns. The minister, like a black jaguar, saw in her something unique, something that defied the conventional norms of palace society. This peculiar look of Oscar's gave their relationship a note of special intrigue. Urania, realizing this fact, realized that there was something more between them than just a lady and a minister. It was an alliance of two people willing to break tradition to follow their own path in this intricate game of palace intrigue. Perhaps, however, this attitude was based on the fact that both Urania and Oscar had been commoners in their previous lives. Urania had always considered herself insignificant, but Oscar, with his incredible talent, proved that even origin was no barrier to success. Urania admired Oscar for his extraordinary abilities, seeing in him an example of a man who, despite his circumstances, was able to rise up and become a significant person. She began to realize that she herself could overcome her own doubts and limitations as well as her companion, creating her own path in this palace world. When Oscar was called to war, he put all his determination and skill into his service. His courage and tact allowed him to achieve great success, earning him the respect of his fellow soldiers. After completing his military campaign, Oscar returned as a respected hero, having earned his reputation on the battlefield. For his merit and talent, Oscar was summoned to serve in the minister's office, where his exceptional abilities did not go unnoticed. He soon assumed the high post of minister, becoming one of the key figures in palace politics. This journey to the heights of power only confirmed that even in a world of intrigue and betrayal, talent and determination find their way to success. Oscar proved himself to be a man of exceptional strength, both on the battlefield and in education. The story of his life was a source of fascination to Urania. The first time she met the minister, she could not help herself and asked a huge number of questions, trying to keep her ease while hiding behind the king's back. Urania was fascinated by the way Oscar combined strength and intelligence, revealing a deep knowledge of various fields. Her questions expressed not only her interest in his personal history, but also her desire to understand how one can look at the world in the way a man of exceptional qualities does. Urania had always been interested in unusual success stories, and Oscar's journey from simple official to minister was a real focus for her. When she questioned the secret of his success, Oscar answered with confidence that his focus had always been on how to win battles by finding a place to demonstrate his strength. This philosophy struck a chord with Urania. She saw Oscar not only as a man with military experience, but also as someone who could apply his strength and wisdom in different areas of life. This answer became a source of inspiration for her and encouraged her to think that even within the palace walls one can find one's way, demonstrating one's own uniqueness and strength of character. Urania took advantage of the moment by running out from behind the king's back, genuinely happy to have outstanding individuals like Oscar by His Majesty's side. Her eyes sparkled with delight as she expressed her feelings in front of the minister. She hoped that Oscar would continue to assist King Kraus III, trusting in his ability and wisdom. This moment was not only an expression of Urania's gratitude to Oscar, but also an underscoring of her faith in the team's ability to overcome any challenge. The interaction between the king, the minister, and Urania herself promised to be the foundation for realizing great ideas and achieving important goals in this exciting palace narrative. To such hopes of Urania, Oscar responded with an assurance that he would continue to support His Majesty, addressing the girl as Mistress Urania. This affectionate epithet sounded like a gentle reminder to Urania that even in a past life, she was the only one who considered them close. The relationship they built in the palace, despite the intrigues and fickleness of fate, proved to be real and exceptional. This tiny moment of remembrance bridged the gap between past and present, taking on new meaning and depth. Urania felt that her connection to Oscar was not limited to her current life, but reached into the depths of time, making their bond even more unique and meaningful. Urania, looking at the books in Oscar's hands, decided to find out what the works were about, raising her question to the minister. However, in response to her curiosity, Oscar waved her away, emphasizing that it was not a subject for her intervention. This small moment created a veil of mystery around the books, leaving Urania puzzled and perhaps spurring her interest even more. The books in the minister's hands became a symbol of an unknown, mysterious world that might hold the keys to some secrets or even fateful decisions. Oscar's arrogance reminded Urania that at the moment she was just a common maid, not the king's mistress. Excitement and resentment overwhelmed her, making her fingers clench on the fabric of her uniform. She turned away from her former friend, pronouncing that he could mind his own business. The moment made her reflect on the fact that even someone as powerful and strong as Oscar was under the sway of circumstance and the hierarchy of palace life. Urania's eyes flashed with the realization that even someone who seems so unshakable can fall victim to power and influence. This moment was another step in her understanding of how complex and intertwined relationships are in the world of the palace, where each character plays a unique role. Urania settled back on the steps, exhaling heavily, and stretched out her shabby legs. With a slight lift of her uniform, she bare her knees, beginning to rub the skin, realizing how sore her tired legs were. The moment of rest on the steps became a small refuge where she could let go of tension and carefully feel every large and small detail of her tired body. Closed in on herself and immersed in inner reflection, Urania continued her journey through the labyrinths of past and present, experiencing moments of strength and weakness that are closely intertwined in the life of even a simple maid. Urania's gesture did not go unnoticed by Oscar. The minister, watching the scene closely, approached Urania and said that if she chose to stay, her presence might disturb the other visitors to the library. There was a sense of concern for the comfort of all present, but at the same time perhaps an undercurrent of jealousy for the interrupted moment of communion with the books. This brief encounter with Oscar has given the situation a new dimension, emphasizing that even in this strange return to the past, Urania is not free to enjoy privacy and peace, subject to the internal and external rules of the palace. Thinking about how boring it could be to talk to the minister, Urania suddenly announced that her leg had recently been injured, and as soon as the pain was gone, she would leave the library immediately. It was an invisible maneuver, allowing her to maintain her intimacy with the books while remaining in the shadows, so as not to draw unnecessary attention to her personal life. A sly light flashed in her eyes as she waited for Oscar's reaction to this unexpected turn of events. At the report of the pain in Urania's leg, Minister Oscar decided to take matters into his own hands. He knelt down beside her like a diligent healer ready to comfort a suffering patient. The handkerchief, like a magic wand, unfurled in his hands, ready to cover her pain and ease her discomfort. With care and attention, he began to gently treat her damaged, marvelous body, as if creating an exquisite art of care. He warned that continued reckless rubbing on the enlarged leg could only aggravate it. Uttering words filled with the harmony of understanding and care, he recommended that this troublesome episode be urgently remedied by applying rest and fixation to the site of the ailment in order to reduce the disturbance and ensure that the leg got the rest it deserved. In an unexpected moment, he pointed his finger like an arrow toward the point where the scratch from the cursed branch gaped. And then, like magic, Urania jumped up like a sudden breeze beneath her feet. Minister Oscar, all in his imperious determination, declared that every scratch was like a comma in the story of life, and there was much more to this misfortune than a mere accidental collision with a branch. There was a note of mystery in his statement, as if every windrush in the forest was a sigh of nature passing several fates. He decided to unravel this forest whisper by asking if Urania had witnessed a mysterious duel involving several mysterious individuals. Urania raced like a meteor to justify herself, claiming that the coincidence of their fates had allowed her to cross paths with His Highness, who, like a ray of light in a dark corridor, had illuminated her with kindness. She did not miss the opportunity to emphasize that His Highness's high pedigree was no barrier to his noble treatment of her, an ordinary servant girl. This unexpected episode pierced the queen's heart like an arrow, revealing her jealous nature. It was as if a formidable chord had sounded in the labyrinth of her feelings, and the queen, being a living portrait of passion, could not conceal her excitement. Each word of Urania plucked the secret gloves of jealousy from the queen like a glove, revealing the darker side of her inner world. Suddenly, like a talented surgeon, Minister Oscar tightened the bandage on Urania's wounded leg with unexpected skill, gently overtaking each scuff, as if a restorer were restoring a precious work of art. Leaving her no opportunity to complete her thought because of the sudden sensation of pain, he rose, revealing his resolve in caring for the maid. Rising like a great guardian, he raised his hand like a gift for the difficulty encountered and offered her his support, asking if she would like to try to feel the solid ground beneath her feet again. At that moment, his hand, like a bridge across a river of difficulties, beckoned her to step forward into the embrace of the unknown. Suddenly stunned by this unexpected show of concern, Urania, as if frozen in surprise, did not even dare to extend her own hand, hesitating like a tea leaf in water. Her inner world was a whirlwind of doubts, questions, and unresolved riddles. Should an ordinary servant girl break this invisible barrier and allow the touch of a superior representative? Like an experienced guide in a maze of doubts, however, Minister Oscar urged the girl on. His determination was a beacon in this moment of hesitation, and then, as if by magic, she, as if flying on wings of confidence, rose quickly, gaining confidence, supported by the warm and reliable presence of Minister Oscar. Holding Urania up like a guide in a world of mystery, Oscar, like a caring mentor, asked where the maids' rooms were located, promising to lead her through this labyrinth. In response, Urania, as if a heroine shining with her own light, asserted that she was quite capable of getting to her own place on her own. She pondered that returning there at this moment might turn out to have unpleasant consequences, for there were waiting like an ambush on her, the king's maids intent on her revenge. Thus, in this moment, as if in a dance between trust and autonomy, Oscar and Urania exchanged words, revealing to us the enigmatic pages of their interaction. Doubt clearly migrated into Oscar's expression as he wondered, somewhat skeptically, if Urania had any intention of evading the current situation and maintaining her place in the living slow-motion frame their words and movements were creating. Like a guard, he questioningly slowed her step towards the library as if blocking her path with his own body. Stunned by the accuracy of Urania's guess, like a gaping arena, the situation remained hopeless. She had no choice but to inform Minister Oscar of the exact location of the maids' rooms, like a clue to the hidden corridors. In Minister Oscar's arms, as if in protective armor, Urania embarked on a silent journey to the place where the maids' rooms lurked. Her thoughts were bubbling like a cauldron of riddles, how to stop the minister from entering those mysterious chambers. In this moment, she was to become the artist of the conversation, creating invisible brushes with which to paint the dialogue that framed their interaction. Urania's heart beat rhythmically like music in a dance as she resolutely decided to stop Oscar like a lord of the art of words. Like a feather, she wanted to create an unusual dialogue that could take them to a new level of understanding. Suddenly, Urania, like a spellbinder of cloud fantasies, brought up the subject of weather, speaking of the genuine heat of the day and expressing her wish that the whole year would be filled with coolness. Her words, like a light breeze, might have smoothed out the tension, but Oscar, like an experienced caretaker of the land, immediately brought a new facet to the conversation. With the logical coherence of an agronomist, he inserted his point of view, explaining that without the necessary warmth after the rainy season, the crops would not come up, threatening the harvest. The rhythmic melody of economic considerations sounded in his words like the beating of a hammer in a forge. After completing his chain of logic, he cut off, as if he were the master of reality, that Urania should not spread such views, like a warning before forbidden fruit. Oscar's words, like a sudden gust of wind, confused Urania greatly, leaving a slight misunderstanding in her soul. Her dreams of easy conversation and weather vanes shattered against the walls of logic and economic reasoning. Absent-mindedly apologizing, she tried to convey her sincere intention of just chatting rather than launching into an unexpected lecture on weather vagaries and their effect on agriculture. Unspoken thoughts flickered in Urania's eyes as if in a lake of mild confusion, and she strove, as if atoning for her mistake, to return the conversation to the familiar rails of everyday intercourse. Urania, as if walking between the lines of a secret code, could not fathom what the maids and even the ladies of rank found so attractive about Oscar. In her eyes, he was an enigma whose contours were beyond her comprehension. Like an architect of the world, she tried to read in his appearance, but the signs were incomprehensible. It seemed as if Oscar had no interest in women's hearts at all, as if he were an immovable mountain, despite the winds of attention and love that came his way. In this secret game of feelings and obscure female preferences, Urania felt like an outsider, slowly unraveling the puzzle that lay before her. Urania, as if fascinated by her own idea, began to think that Minister Oscar might be able to escape his precarious position in commoner society by simply making the chess move of marrying a noblewoman. The outline of a plan flashed through her mind like a map to the exit of a maze. What if his connection to high society was the key to his new reality? This thought, like a glimmer of light in a dark corridor, made Urania think about possible ways to change her fate. The world around her, like a game of chessboard, offered a variety of options, and she, like a chess player, began to ponder which of them would be the best move. Noticing Urania's attentive gaze, Oscar couldn't bear to ask if anything unusual had happened. At this, the maid decided to appeal to her own curiosity, shaking the air with a question as to why the minister had not yet taken the step toward marriage, given his apparent popularity. However, like a sword, Oscar deflected the question by saying that he did not tolerate lazy people. Thus, in this mini-dramatic episode of their conversation, as if in a play with an unexpected plot twist, the attention shifted from the question about the incident to the conversation about the minister's life principles, revealing another secret of his difficult character. Urania, as if releasing an arrow into the sky, said that, in that case, Oscar just needed someone who wasn't lazy. However, the minister herself, as if turning a key in the lock of her thoughts, asked if the girl had someone she could recommend. Such a casual question, mixed with genuine interest, seemed to reveal another card in the deck of his life decisions. It was as if this moment was a revelation in their dialogue, as if they had discovered a new, previously unexplored corner of each other. Mixed with a light spirit of humor, the question about references was an illustration of the unpredictable and fascinating word game they were creating in that moment. Hiding something in the shadows of his words, Oscar stated that when it comes to marriage, many women express a desire to marry a powerful man, seeking to immerse themselves in a luxurious world of privilege. His words, like an enigmatic whisper, called to mind the ulterior motives and aspirations of those who dream of union with a powerful partner. This comment, like a key, opened the door to understanding his own view of the intrigues of marriage, like a labyrinth that each of them imagined in his own way. Thus they continued this dialogue, where each word became a link in the chain of their understanding. Urania herself was suddenly deep in thought, realizing that there was nothing wrong with such a desire. In every human being, she realized, lurked the urge to squeeze the most out of life, like honey from a honeycomb. Everyone, man or woman, dreams of being able to plunge into abundance, to take all that life has to offer. This thought, like a glowing torch in her reflection, brought a new note to the conversation, the realization that the desire for wealth and influence is inevitably embedded in every soul, and it is not at all a sign of something negative. Thus, like a magic formula, they continued their conversation, where each word was like a stone thrown into the well of their thoughts. However, Minister Oscar, as if revealing the cards of his philosophy, suddenly declared that in his world, a person who does not strive for constant development becomes scum. To him, people who strive for development are focused on their own growth, not marriage. His words, like the wisdom of an elder, invited a new perspective on life. This remark, like a star, illuminated their dialogue, as if opening another layer in the understanding of different values. In this light, marriage became not just a union of two people, but a mirror in which each sees his or her own path to growth and development. That's why it would be hard to find someone who wants to get married. In the midst of such deep reflection, Urania, who had recently been withering at the thought that her only way out of poverty was to return to her role as the king's mistress, suddenly began to feel like a small mirror in a vast cosmos of possibilities. Pondering that if she had the opportunity to do something other than servanthood, the question arose, would she want to be a better person? This question, like a key, opened up her inner world, revealing unknown horizons before her eyes. Now, in this moment of inner self-discovery, she was faced with the possibility of choice, with the question of what she was really capable of and what she wanted from her future. Suddenly, two maids came on the stage, holding long, thick wooden sticks like warriors ready for battle. Their eyes glittered with displeasure, and words flew like poisonous arrows toward Urania, accompanied by threats and insults. It was evident that the air was filled with electric tension, ready to explode at any moment. Urania, faced with this sudden attack as if on a dark wave of unexpected events, stood speechless, staring at her aggressive antagonists. At that moment, Even the dark shadows of her previous musings faded before the real threat being thrown in her face. Suddenly, the red-haired maid's gaze fell on Minister Oscar, who was holding Urania, and this unexpected turn of events seemed to freeze in midair. The maids, like variable pieces in a game, instantly changed their facial expressions, replacing aggression with obliging interest. With polite smiles, they began to inquire what had brought Minister Oscar to this place, as if they recognized something special in his presence. Minister Oscar, like an artist observing the palette of his emotions, radiated an incredible aura of restraint and nobility. His face expressed peace, like the calm waves on the mirrored surface of an evening lake. With this perfect harmony, he turned to his faithful maid like a caring master to his favorite pet. Urania, gazing at him with her marvelous brown eyes, like the reflection of autumn forests in a lake, was notified that the minister, who was, in fact, the embodiment of benevolence, had helped her overcome the unbearable pain in her leg. The stick in his hands became a kind of symbol of care, like a magical artifact that banished the shadows of adversity. In response to this act of mercy, Urania, like an opening flower bud under the gentle touch of morning dew, received it with gratitude and appreciation. Her eyes sparkled like the most precious stones in a crown worn by some ancient rulers. The library, witness to much knowledge and mystery, beckoned to Urania with a peculiar attraction, like a sacred refuge for seekers of wisdom. Her delighted smile was like a response to the minister's generous gesture, like nature responding to the first signs of spring's awakening. The red-haired maid, as if dancing masterfully on a string between determination and a subtle smile, took Urania under her caring arm. Her gesture was like a caressing chord in the melody of perception, like a lightly touched breeze on a warm summer evening. Like a skillful actress, she was assuring the minister that now, in their common home, he was able to provide Urania with all the benefits of this world. Urania, realizing that this sort of lullaby of persuasion was the beginning of a new chapter of her life, like a pen in the hands of a skilled author, accepted the change with incredible grace. Invisible threads of commitment pulled her towards her destiny like magic strings in the weave of fate, and she felt that she could not escape this whirlwind of events like a traveler in a fairy forest. With a grateful look that was like the reflection of moonlight in the mirrored surface of a night lake, Urania turned to Minister Oscar. Her words of gratitude flowed from her heart like a stream of clear water in a forest spring, and forever remained in the memory of that moment, as if engraved on the pages of eternity. Minister Oscar, like a meteor, turned suddenly and moved on his way like a great lord, leaving the winds of change in his wake. His steps were like twinkling stars in the dark night, carrying him away to new cares and responsibilities like a guardian of his kingdom. At that moment, as the minister was drifting away into the distance, a red-haired maid, like a secret messenger in a world of intrigue, began to whisper in Urania's ear. Her words were like the hushed rustlings of the wind in the forest, a portent of something vague and mysterious, like a shadow hanging over their present dormitory. In the shadows of her whispers there was a threat, like a whirlwind of resurrected vengeance waiting to happen. Urania, like a windflower petal, slowly realized that her escape had become a reality, and the shadow of betrayal was beginning to cover her like a shroud of mystery. But there was still a light in her eyes, like the rays of a rising sun ready to chase away the darkness. She had to go through this ordeal like a wanderer in a mysterious forest, but she was determined to make her way, like a heroine in her own fairy tale. Suddenly, like a feather swaying in a light wind, Minister Oscar slowed his steps and looked around him like a magician. Something important had caught his attention, and he turned toward Urania like an arrow changing its direction in flight. The question about the handkerchief, which he expressed in his gaze like an unknown mystery, put a kind of lock on the words, depriving them of direct wording. The handkerchief, as if a symbol of his care, became a kind of emblem of the magic enveloping past moments. At this moment, the harmony of nature seemed to preserve the shared moment for them. The silence in the air seemed to deepen time, creating a sense of slight stupor, like a fleeting glimpse into the past. Urania, like a fairy dancing in the light of the moon, under the influence of this invisible spell, perceived her surroundings like a painting, where all the details had their own special meaning. The noble minister continued on his way like a star moving in its orbit. while the maid, like a secret messenger, began to whisper to Urania something mysterious, like a portent of things to come. Her words were like a quiet whisper of the wind, penetrating to the very depths of the soul, like a portent of changes shrouded in darkness. Urania, like a wanderer in a labyrinth, realized that she was about to pass through a whirlwind of unknown trials. Suddenly, like the shadow of a passing cloud, Minister Oscar shared his plan. He laid it out like an artist, adding every detail to the canvas of the coming event. Consistently, like a virtuoso storyteller, he told Urania that the day after tomorrow, his footsteps would once again step into the sacred spaces of the library, like a return to the temple of knowledge. There was a subtle inviting note in his words, like a melody playing in an empty concert hall. The delicacy of his expression left the feeling of an inviting song, like a call to a secluded forest circle where every leaf whispers its own story. And so, like an invisible bridge between their destinies, Minister Oscar suggested that Urania bring the shawl specifically to the library. This proposal was woven into their relationship like a new plot in a book that suddenly opened its pages. Urania faced a choice like a crossroads, each leading to uncharted corners of their interaction. Minister Oscar left space again, like a departing star, leaving behind him a luminous trail in the evening sky. His outline disappeared into the shadows of distant prospects, like a mysterious secret unfolding in the unknown future. At this time, the red-haired maid, like a sinister figure in the shadows, continued to remain in the background like a mysterious image in a hypnotic dream. Her attacking words, like arrows in the night, brought with them echoes of menace. She insisted, like a cruel bailiff on secrecy, on finding out how it was that Urania had crossed paths with Minister Oscar. Thus, in the silent air that remained after the minister's departure, a mysterious swirl of intrigue and mystery began to unfold once more, like the pages of a book fluttering in the imagination. The sudden realization that Minister Oscar might be attracted to what he had seen came to Urania's mind like a sudden ray of light penetrating the dark clouds of doubt. The thought flashed through her mind like an invisible arrow, creating a pause in the flow of events. In response to the red-haired maid's persistent question, Urania's gesture seemed to playfully try to titillate her like a light tickle of wind. She announced that Minister Oscar had apparently found something in her appearance or actions that caught his eye. It was an answer like a slight slap in the dance of skillful words, expressing equanimity before such situations. Thus there was a sense of mystery in the air, as if mixed up in an intrigue in which each step created a new paradox in the fabric of the relationship. Urania, like a sharp strategist, sensed that she had an opportunity to take the rope of fate into her own hands. Realizing that giving up the handkerchief would temporarily protect her from the maid's wrath, she decided to make the most of the moment. The fire of determination flashed in her eyes like a ray of light in the gloom. Hearing the mocking statements that Minister Oscar had taken a liking to her, the maids, like flocks of wild birds, prepared to attack, raising their sticks of threat. However, the red-haired maid, like an experienced referee in sports, intervened in time to stop them. Her clever logic, like an invisible shield, kept resentment and rage in the air. Thus, in this game of intrigue and arrogance, Urania took the rope of her fate in her hands like a cunning player on a chessboard, ready to make the move that would change the course of the game. Suddenly, the red-haired maid let out a remark like an explosion of resentment, saying that Urania looked pathetic since she had hoped that something would change when she was beaten a few days later. Her words sounded like a venomous blob of discontent, darkly coloring the air. In response to this outburst, Urania, like a tree resistant to the rays of a thunderstorm, maintained her equanimity. Like an experienced navigator, she knew that the red-haired maid's indignation was only a passing phenomenon, and that her words were like the sound of the wind rushing past. Meanwhile, in this microcosm within the walls, each move, like a piece on a chessboard, created a new dynamic in the game of power and envy. In the privacy of her own room, Urania thought about the source of her irritation, the red-haired Martha. In her mind, like a complex labyrinth of thoughts, the shadows of resentment hovered, making it hard to understand what was causing the resentment. Nevertheless, in the depths of her soul, she realized that thanks to Minister Oscar, she was, at least for the time being, in a safe space. As Urania bent to thinking about the handkerchief, she wondered, like an explorer of secret paths, why the minister needed this object covered in the tiny footprints of a maid. Her thoughts soared through the air like birds, trying to make sense of this incredible turn of events. She began to realize that Minister Oscar's support might have been for a reason, like a cunning move in a game of chess. The fire of curiosity flickered in her eyes, like a light in a dark room, ready to reveal all the secrets. However, upon careful reflection on Minister Oscar's haughty behavior, Urania shook her head resolutely. Her eyes reflected determination, like a ray of light in the night, and she concluded that perhaps the handkerchief had a special personal meaning to him, and therefore decided that she should wash it. The gesture was like a decisive note in her inner symphony. Rather than delve into complex thoughts about the minister's motives, Urania chose to accept the shawl as a mystery, as an enigmatic symbol in his story. That decision, like a curtain, shrouded her thoughts in a fog of mystery, giving her the opportunity to continue her journey in this theater of intrigue. During the night, Urania was in the embrace of restless thoughts that swirled through her mind like shadowy whirlwinds. Minister Oscar's words that a man who does not strive for growth is destined to be discarded hung in the air of her room like invisible spirits of truth. Lying on her back, she pondered, deciding that perhaps he meant that it was important to at least try to grow. That thought, like a soft touch of wind, flowed through her mind, filling the space with hope and understanding. Urania felt that in this grain of wisdom lay the inspiration to try, to strive, even if the path to growth seemed difficult. Thus, in the night, as the stars sparkled in the heavens, Urania pondered the meaning of the minister's words, as if they were a secret message inviting her to open new horizons and give herself a chance to grow. But disappointment came over Urania like a dark wave of realization that she had never put effort into anything. This bitter lesson in self-discovery enveloped her like a sad fog, obscuring the clarity of her soul. She pondered what to do next, facing the prospect of enduring cleaning until her hands began to ache or flattering aristocrats by sacrificing herself ruthlessly. In her thinking, each option seemed unacceptable. She realized that these paths were offered to her as if on a tray, but none of them seemed even acceptable. It was a moment of choice, where each alternative was like a dark road into the unknown. Thus, as if trapped in a dark room, Urania was faced with a dilemma with no apparent light at the end of the tunnel and tried in vain to figure out the next move in this complex game of life. Urania's own thoughts made her suddenly surge like a wind-driven wave. As she thought about it, she realized that she was already doing her job well. This realization, like a ray of light in a dark space, pierced her consciousness. In a moment of reverie, she seemed to rise up on the bed as if an inner fire had rekindled in her eyes. It became clear to her that despite the difficulties and disappointments, she had the ability to cope. This realization, like morning light in a window, illuminated her inner world. Suddenly, she sprang out of bed and headed for the dresser as if under the influence of an inner impulse. Realizing that she had a goal, albeit a dubious one, she felt again that she had to try. Determination flashed in her eyes like a ray of light in a dark room. In front of the dresser, as if in front of the altar of the future, she realized her new goal, to become the king's mistress again, as she had been in her past life before the mysterious return to the past. This deliberate step, like a first step into an uncharted world, sealed her decision to move forward despite the difficulties. In this way, Urania, as if transported into a new chapter of her destiny, regained her purpose and motivation as a guiding star in a dark celestial space. 2 days after this important decision, which lit a new fire of determination in Urania, in her past life she was fleeing from maids whose mocking threats had become unbearable. Everything around her seemed dark and hostile, like ominous shadows, and she sought refuge from them. On the way, as if in an ominous dream, she came upon a guard who had her pinned against the wall. That moment was like a sudden whirlwind, where time slowed down and Urania felt the weight of authority and submission. A mixture of fear and determination flashed in her eyes, like a fire unquenchable in her heart. Just when Urania thought the end had come, King Kraus III appeared out of the dark opening like an unexpected savior. His presence brought relief into the air, like a light at the end of a tunnel. Kraus III had intervened, saving her from a guard whose actions seemed ruthless and threatening. At such a difficult moment for her, when Urania faced the ultimate danger, she gave in to the excitement and allowed herself to be embraced by the king. Her eyes reflected a mixture of fear and gratitude. It was a choice made at a time when the alternative seemed more unbearable, to be the cause of constant abuse and threats for something she didn't do. Just when it seemed to Urania that her journey had come to an end, King Kraus III suddenly appeared, like a bright angel rescuing her from the power of a dark guardian. At this difficult time for her, when a whirlwind of events threatened to overwhelm her hopes, Urania surrendered and allowed herself to find herself in the king's arms. In that moment, on the verge of despair, she decided that if her only alternative was to be the object of constant abuse for something she didn't do, then maybe it was better to turn into a demon herself. Her eyes flashed with grim determination and some lust for revenge. She took this choice as a dark path where she was willing to become someone hated for the sake of her survival. As before, Urania was faced with a desperate choice, for by continuing in her path, she risked being beaten unconscious. On the evening of the 15th, she had a date with the king, for that alone offered her the opportunity of becoming his mistress and thus gaining some form of security and influence in this cruel world.